take collective action to transform our region now.
Good morning and greetings wherever you are in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union and around the world. This is ECCB Digital Dialogues, a specially designed program for you as we navigate this pandemic together. I am Timothy Antoine and I will be your host for the next 90 minutes as we explore pandemic and education. That's our feature today. But before we continue, I do wish to extend my heartfelt condolences to all those who have lost loved ones as a consequence of COVID-19. This has been a very difficult time for our region. I especially extend my thoughts and prayers to the people of Grenada who are going through a most difficult time. We've seen the deaths. Many of these people I know personally, and this is heartbreaking, painful to say the least. And so I pray that the God of all comfort will bring comfort to all those who have lost loved ones to COVID-19, and that you will continue to be comforted in your time of grief and loss. Folks, we are in a war. This is a plague. This is an enemy that is determined and deadly. And we have to rally and fight back. In that regard, I want to commend all those who have stepped forward to take the vaccine. And at this moment, for those who are hesitant or still undecided, I want to encourage you to also step forward to protect yourselves and your loved ones. Too many people have died. And now to our focus for today, pandemic and education. We have a wonderful panel. We'll get to that shortly. But in terms of context, I want to remind us that we are, in fact, we've just begun another pandemic school year. And for many students, parents, teachers, and policymakers, there is significant apprehension about how can we safely conduct education in our region at this time. Many of our schools are already in online situations, and those, for example, in St. Kitts and Nevis, some schools, not all, which started in person, have had to go online as a result of exposure coming out through the contact tracing process. So this is a challenging time for students, parents, and educators in our region. Without a doubt, our education system has been severely disrupted. In April 2020, the World Economic Forum reported that more than 1.2 billion students were out of school. Here in the Caribbean, we don't have an exact number, but we know that many, far too many of our students are also out of school. And even where they are online, in theory, the learning outcomes are suboptimal for a raft of reasons. And some of the reasons that we have observed to date are inequity in access to education as a consequence of the digital divide, the connected and the unconnected. Childcare challenges for parents. Parents have to now homeschool while working. In some cases, they can't do both, so the children are suffering. Food and nutrition insecurity for socially economically disadvantaged students. Many of our students rely on the school feeding program. That hot meal, that is not available right now for them because they're home. The potential lifetime earnings impact resulting from loss in learning, and we have not begun to measure that, but trust me, that is a significant number, and we will see it in years to come. The impact of social isolation on the socio-emotional development of our children, and finally, the impact on the mental health of students, teachers, parents, caregivers, and I dare say even policymakers. This is a tough time for everyone. And so as our region faces fresh waves of the COVID-19 pandemic, and low vaccination rates persist in many of our countries, and we see the development, the emergence of more deadly variants, such as Delta, these challenges I just mentioned persist. So every effort must be made to ensure that no child is left behind, and that we do not lose all the hard-earned gains of our education system during this pandemic. And so as we think about how to safely deliver education to our children, there is a bigger, broader conversation that must ensue about the future of education for our children and for our economies. And that is a discussion which should begin now as well, or continue, because in some cases we had already started it even before the pandemic. But there is a sense of urgency now to move that along and to come to terms with the new realities of COVID, but also of the digital economy and the 21st century. So here to help us explore some of these issues, we have a wonderful panel. I'll get to the panel very shortly, but first some housekeeping announcements. This dialogue is being streamed live on ECCB Connect's Facebook page, and of course, we also have attendees in our Zoom room. And as usual, for those in the Zoom room, we ask that you keep your microphones muted to ensure a smooth flow of the dialogue. Attendees, if you have any questions, comments, you put it in the chat box. Questions, you put in the Q&A box, right? Q&A for questions, chat for any comments. And we will ensure that your questions are seen by the moderator, and of course we feel we put to the panel as we can. We have an ECCB colleague who is monitoring both our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel, ECCB Connects, and we'll also attempt to draw questions from those social media platforms, those channels, as we move to the Q&A section. We always encourage a respectful dialogue to ensure that, of course, we are able to hear each other, listen to each other, and of course, to avoid any, offensive content. And we know you will do that. If for whatever reason there is a disruption in our event, we simply ask that you use the link provided to reconnect to the dialogue. As usual, at the end, there will be a recording of this dialogue, both on our Facebook page, ECCB Connects, as well as on our YouTube channel, also called ECCB Connects, for those of you who wish to view after, or for those who may not be able to see the entire thing or hear the entire event this morning. Now, we do have a poll today. We have 3 questions for you, and we're going to open the poll right now. And so you can answer at any time. And if you don't know how we do this, I will repeat. www.menti.com, that's www.menti.com. That's the access. Once you get there, you need a code, and the code today is 55681307. I repeat, the code today is 55681307. www.menti.com. By the way, that app is free. You can download it, and you can use it not just for dialogues, but for anything else, church, school, community, whatever. Check it out. And so we will now like to recognize the fact that we have some radio partners, radio and television stations partnering with us again. In Anguilla today, we have Radio Anguilla and Class FM Radio, Cool FM Radio. In Antigua and Barbuda, Nice FM and ABS Radio. In Dominica, Q95 and Carry FM, as well as DBS Radio, which will rebroadcast this evening at 7 p.m. In Grenada, we have We FM Radio, GBN Classic FM, Sister Eyes Radio Carriacou. In Montserrat, we have Radio Montserrat, Radio ZJB. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we have Win FM, ZIZ Radio, Vaughan Radio, which is on Nevis, and Freedom FM. In St. Lucia, Rhythm FM, and WVent, WeVent. And in St. Vincent and the Grenadines today, NBC Radio, Nice Radio, WeFM Radio. Those are our broadcast partners, and we want to thank them for joining us for ECCB Digital Dialogues. If you just joined, you're listening to ECCB Digital Dialogues. Our focus today, pandemic and education. I am Timothy Antoine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And now to our panel. First, I'd like to present Mr. William Vincent Hodge, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education in St. Kitts. Mr. Hodge is a master teacher and school principal. He reminds me of my mother in so many ways. They have a similar path. Mr. Hodge has been a principal at both the primary level and the secondary level. And in fact, at Sandy Point, which is now this Charles E. Mills Secondary, he was the first student to become the principal of that school. He has served education very well. And when he thought he was retired and going to relax, he was recalled for higher service even. He is now serving as a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education in the middle of a pandemic. P.S. Hodge, good morning and welcome. I'm not hearing you. Just on mute.
Good morning, Governor Antoine. I'm delighted to be participating in the digital dialogue organized by the ECCB.
Thank you, sir. Welcome. Next, we have Ms. Beverly LeBlanc. Ms. LeBlanc is a teacher and educator from Dominica with over 40 years of experience in education. She has taught at many levels. Of more recent vintage is her work with children with disabilities or children with special needs She's a mother of 4 as well, so she's not just an educator, she's a parent. So she's seen this from several angles. She's passionate about her work, and I'm very pleased that we have Ms. LeBlanc from Dominica, the Nature Isle, with us this morning. Ms. LeBlanc, Beverly, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's indeed an honor to be part of this panel and to share my insight and perspective of education, particularly during the pandemic.
Very good. We're looking forward. Thank you. And then we have Ms. Child, Ornella Child, a teacher from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Ms. Child has been a teacher for about 12 years. She teaches at the primary level, but she is very passionate about education. She is also from an area called Sandy Bay, not Sandy Point, PS, Sandy Bay in St. Vincent and Grenadines. There's a Sandy Point in St. Kitts. And of course, that place was part of the red zone. And you know, all of us know that St. Vincent and Grenadines recently experienced the eruption of the La Soufrière volcano. So Ms. Child is seeing this not just from the pandemic, but also from a volcano. She's in the middle of it all, and she's teaching and she's experiencing in real time the challenges of the education system. Ms. Child, welcome.
Good morning, Governor and ECCB. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I thank you for having me.
Very good. And those of you who are familiar with our program know that we strive for diversity. So we look at geographic diversity. We have people from the Windwards, we have from the Leewards, we have male, we have female, we have practitioners, we have policymakers and advisors, we have demographics. You know, we look at all of these things when we constitute our panel. So we have a very, very good panel, and I'm very pleased that they've taken the time to be with us today. Now, we've finished the introductions, we finished the housekeeping, and now to the questions. So those of you who are not familiar, or since you join us, by the way, today is our 15th edition of ECCB Digital Dialogues. Yes, we've been at it for a little while. So we have 3 segments. The first segment is the moderator's questions to the panel. The second segment is our audience poll. Today we have 3 questions. And the third and final segment is our Q&A, where we go into the chat, we go into the our channels, our Facebook, and we look for the questions. And then we do a little closing very quickly at the end. So without further ado, let's begin our panel discussion. P.S. Hodge, I'd like to start with you. So from the onset of the pandemic, the conventional mode of delivering education in our region, you know, until the onset, it was classroom-based, limited integration of technology. When we incorporated technology, we've done it in the context of the physical classroom. We now find ourselves disrupted and having to do a lot of this online. And so my question is, several questions here. How prepared were we to adapt to this new virtual mode? And what are the lessons and insights that you have gleaned from working in the trenches in this pandemic for the last 18 months? P.S.?
Thank you, Governor, for that interesting question. If I am to be candid, I would say that none of the governments in the region, the education systems, we were ready for the onset of COVID. And there would have been good reasons why we were not ready. We did not see it coming. We did not expect that the pandemic would impact our school systems in the way that it did. We did not envisage that our instructional processes in schools would be disrupted in the way or in the ways in which it has been, or the systems were disrupted. Now, here in St. Kitts, Nevis, if I may use that context, when the pandemic, we had our first cases of the virus, we had to close school abruptly. And it was at this point that we had to turn to teachers principals for them to come up. They had the latitude, they had the freedom to come up with any platform that would allow them to engage students. And then when the term started for the third term of that school year, we were able to sit down all through the summer and come up with our plans. Because we recognized at that point we had a number of lessons to learn, and we had to learn those lessons quickly. So in terms of some of the lessons that we had to learn, we recognize that we had to come up with a plan for continuity of learning. As children had to continue to learn, school had to be in some form. And so even though we were switching to a virtual component, a virtual hybrid in terms of virtual and face-to-face, we had to come up with a plan for continuity of learning. And so we turned to the online platform. Our teachers had to be trained to teach online. Previously, the focus was using the technology to integrate that technology in the instructional process. But at this point now, we had to use the technology to deliver classroom instruction. And so we had to decide on a platform. Yes, teachers were using whichever platform they felt comfortable with, but the ministry had to decide on a particular platform that all school would use. And so we had to do orientation, we had to do training so that persons would be familiar with that particular platform. We had to do a number of onboarding. All the students that have been onboarded, teachers had to be onboarded. And those were lessons that we had to learn fast. Parents had to take on the role of teachers, in some cases, at their homes to enable students to access the platforms and navigate their way through the platforms. And then, of course, we had to learn the difficult lessons that we don't have all of the resources or enough, sufficient of the resources to do online instruction. And so we had to reach out, government, the Ministry of Education had to provide some laptops, some tablets, obviously not enough to go around. And so we had to make do with those that we had at the time. We are still in the process of sorting more devices. There was a challenge of internet, of course, Wi-Fi to enable to get persons connected to the platforms. And so as we navigated our plans, our first term beginning September 2020, yes, we were able to go back face-to-face, but very often or occasionally we had to switch to online. And this has happened again, we are back online, or sometimes we are face-to-face. Some classes might be face-to-face, the whole school might be face-to-face or online. And so those are some of the challenges that we contend with currently. We realized that there was going to be loss of learning. We recognized that the digital divide between the haves and the have-not, that was going to broaden, because not everybody who didn't get a device, some government would be able to provide one for themselves. We recognize that the emotional and social impact, the emotional impact on teachers, and students and parents. These are some of the lessons that we have had to learn. And so the pandemic has plunged us into ways that we never foresaw. We have to be creative and we have to be innovative in ensuring that learning continues. And for our smaller ones, kindergarten, grade 1 and 2, we were able to do paper-based assignments for these students because we didn't realize that they have these skills or they know how to navigate the technology and so on. So I can pause here at this point, Governor, and I'm hoping that I would have given enough information in terms of this question.
You have, and let me just say you've worked very, very hard. I've seen some of that firsthand. My children are in the education system in St. Kitts, and I want to thank you and your colleagues for all the hard work you've done and continue to do in this difficult period. So thank you, PS.
Thank you, Governor.
I know it's not easy. And let me just add that, of course, PS Hodge spoke about access to devices for students and in some cases teachers. But we also have the broader issue of connectivity itself. In some of our homes, many of our homes in the region, we still have copper, in some cases coaxial cable, but copper running to homes, not fiber. So that has an issue in terms of the strength or the quality of the connectivity. So that is an issue as well. Even if you have a device, sometimes the connectivity is not as strong. And even in a work environment, where many of us are remote working, we see it as well. So that's a bigger issue our region has to address, and maybe we'll get back to that. Thank you, PS. Ms. LeBlanc, you are an educator with over 30 years experience, but most recently you've been working with children with special needs, neurodiverse students. And I'd like you to share with us, if you will, what has been the impact of the pandemic on the education of neurodiverse students. Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you very much, Governor. And yes, I am a special education consultant. I've been working with children with special needs. And I must begin by saying, prior to the pandemic, children with special education needs and disabilities were already marginalized. They are the ones who have been stigmatized. They are the ones who are marginalized because of lack of resources, lack of trained teachers. So they were already facing isolation prior to pandemic. In Dominica, we have 4 centers which provide services for special education, for children with special education needs. And the school that I am the director of, Achievement Learning Center, is one of them. Now, the school itself was already facing challenges prior to the pandemic. Interestingly for us, the last day of school for us was the same day that we got our first COVID case, because we had just gotten an eviction notice. So we had no home, and then we had COVID. That in itself gave us some time to go back to the drawing board, because then everybody was home, because as soon as we got the first case of COVID, the schools were shut down. And then so myself and my staff, we didn't have a summer. We spent 6 months, day and night, long days and long nights. So we had to figure out, how are we going to offer our services to our children? We have children with autism, Down syndrome, learning disabilities, a range of disabilities. And so we had to go back to the drawing board. And this in itself took a lot of collaboration on our part. So we worked with the parents. The first thing we did was we had a meeting with our parents individually, because every child needs was different. So we worked with the parents. We wanted to find out what were the needs of the children. We also wanted to look at schedule, how we were going to schedule. Do you have the device? So we had to do an accessibility survey. Do you have the devices? Do you have internet? And then after we did that, we prepared individualized educational plan for each child based on the goals that the parents gave. So we got, luckily for us, and we are blessed, I must say that, through the Ministry of Education, and we want to pay special thanks to Mr. Timothy Lavani and the IT Foundation, we had Chromebooks. So we had the students who were functioning at a high level cognitively, and they could work on the online platform. We had to place them in a particular group. Then we had another group of students now who they were not able to function academically. So we had to figure out what was the best way for them. And then so we decided to use packages. My home, after we shut down, my home is the headquarters of the school. So I print the packages. So I was responsible for printing the packages. But even that in itself was challenges because the parents were at work. Who was going to be working with them? So we had a lot of trial and errors from the onset. We were just we wanted to keep them stimulated. We wanted to keep them occupied. We wanted them to know, we wanted the families to know that we are still there for them. So we were just going through trial and errors. And then eventually we decided for the Ministry of Education, we didn't have a space. So then the Ministry of Education, the permanent secretary, Mrs. Hyson, she gave us to use downstairs the documentation center. So those that were able to do the face-to-face, they would come down. But we had them on a schedule. They would come one by one on different days. Now we also had to consider the well-being of the teachers, because the teachers were traveling and we had COVID. So we decided we would have school Mondays to Thursdays. So we didn't, on a Friday was our regroup, our debriefing. So we meet, we debrief what was working, what wasn't working, what is it we have to do, where we have to strengthen. But we also had further challenges because we had a child, we have children at home, but they have a distraction. So we had to deal with the distraction. Thanks to ECCB, who through Miss John Dominica branch, we were able to get some resources. So we got some headphones for our students. So that now they were to free them from the distraction. So what was happening at home, they were not being distracted, particularly for our students who had ADHD. And then we now had to think of those who had functional skills. Yes, we have children with autism. They're not able to, we only have to teach them functional skills, their daily living skills. So we had some children who were working on their daily living skills, learning to dress, learning to feed themselves, learning to put on their sanitary napkins. So we now had to do home visits. So we now had to get the teachers to go to their homes to teach them these daily living skills. Mm-hmm. We had another student who her goal was working on gross motor skills. We don't have a place where she can do that. Again, thanks to ECCB, they were able to help us and we got a trampoline for this child. So we were just kind of mixing and matching, and as the needs arise, we were looking for ways to meet the needs of our parents. The challenge continues, but I will say though, one of the benefits for this for us was something we've always wanted, which was parent involvement and engagement. Mm-hmm. And COVID gave us that opportunity to work together with our parents, because at that time, we were not the one guiding the learning of the children. The parents were guiding the learning of the children. They would tell us, Miss, this is, for example, when we sent the first package home, a parent said, Miss, my daughter is finishing that too quickly, we need more. So the parents now started to guide us as to how to teach their child. They told us the goals and we worked with them. Mm-hmm. So this in itself was really one of the benefits for us in terms of this pandemic. I mean, we are still learning lessons. We're still having challenges. The numbers now are rising more than they were in March 2020. And then so we are starting school on Monday. So again, this is what we've been doing. What works? We evaluate our plans and what we need to change, what we need to add. So right now we have to go back to packages. So I know over the weekend, I'm going to have to start printing packages. We're going to have to call the PS. We have to sanitize the area because we have 2 children who will be coming face-to-face. Our challenge, though, will be for those who were doing the home visits, because the parents are still not comfortable in the teacher coming to their home. And we are not comfortable in because we do not have a bus. We do not have our own vehicle. We don't have the financial resources to actually pay the teachers to go. Thank you to the National Employment Program, who has been supporting our teachers, because the parents cannot pay the school fee. Some of them have lost their job. So we have these challenges where we are not getting any income because we are a private institution, but we continue to provide these services because we know that these students are marginalized, and then they have to be included because we want to build an inclusive society. So these are some of the challenges that we've been facing. However, as Mr. Hott said, we are being creative, we are being innovative, and we are developing partnership with anybody who wants to have a conversation with us. After we say good morning, good afternoon, we'll ask you, how can you help our school? So this is basically how we go about working with our challenges. And the teachers have been really phenomenal. They work hard. We've had our teachers to do the training because they themselves have to do the training. I had to do the training. I did the training in blended learning with UNESCO. Whatever training is there, I do it, because apart from teaching children with special needs, I also teach at the State College where I train teachers. So I have to upgrade myself and enhance my skills in the technology so I can hold my teachers accountable. I can pass on the information, and I also can improve my professional skills. So working with children with special needs in a face-to-face setting is challenging. It's even more challenging on a virtual platform, but that's what we have. And then so we look at every challenge as an opportunity for growth, as an opportunity for creativity. So we don't let the challenge bog us down, but we go for the challenge. We see the green light, even if the red light is there.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc. I can see that growth mindset, which I like to talk about, very evident in how you've been working. And what you shared puts a perspective. So for those of us who are unhappy with our circumstances and the challenges, just think about those with special needs, the children with special needs. And I suspect we might be feeling a lot better off because our situation may not be as challenging as those children with special needs and the parent and teachers involved. I want to really thank you for that work. I hope that your sharing will shine a light on this important segment or sector of education system, and that more people will bring resources to bear in this very important area. So I want to thank you for that very, very much. These are real issues, folks. Real issues, real people, real children with parents and teachers really playing their part, because we don't want any child to be left behind, including our neurodiverse children. So thank you again, Ms. LeBlanc, for that. That was certainly insightful. So now I'd like to turn to Ms. Child from St. Vincent and Grenadines. Ms. Child, you've had the challenge of being a parent of a school-age child. So you're not just a teacher, you're also a parent. As a parent of a school-age children myself, I empathize. You know, I have two daughters, so I understand that very well as well. You're also a teacher in the red zone in St. Vincent and Grenadines, where La Soufrière volcano erupted in April of this year. So, you have been with two major upheavals. Tell us about your experience as a parent of a student and as a teacher over the last 18 months. What are your specific challenges, and how have you been coping, and how have the students been impacted? Tell us about your experience.
Good morning again, everyone. Antoine, I must say thank you for having me. As a parent of a primary school age child, I would say the experience was a bit challenging, but it was not unbearable. At first, when our country decided to resort to online learning, my daughter didn't attend online classes because their school, students there didn't have laptops or tablets or most of them didn't have internet connection at home. So they did not appear online immediately. Earlier in this year, the government provided for primary school children tablets for them to access the online environment. At first, she was excited. During the course of the period, she became inattentive. So I had to pause my classes for a while to ensure that she is paying attention, to ensure that she's following the class online rules, she's clicking on the raise hand icon to answer her questions. And after a while, she got a hold of it. So then there was smooth running for her. On the other hand, for me, I am not a primary school teacher, as you had said before. I'm a secondary school teacher. It was a very challenging experience. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were not prepared at all. Most of our students do not have technological devices. Just a few in the fifth form had devices which were their smartphones. So we had to work with them. We had to use WhatsApp Messenger, Facebook Messenger. That's how we communicated, that's how we taught. Then I have about 4 students doing Spanish that year. I had to meet them face to face. I had to relax the COVID protocols a bit so that I can have one-on-one with them so that they are prepared. Gratefully, they all were successful.
Very good.
Thanks be to God.
Very good.
No, we went back to face-to-face, last September. This year, we were back online. The students were given tablets, so we were prepared for the online environment. Mm-hmm. However, the class attendance was fluctuating. Mm-hmm. Then in April, the volcano erupted. This disrupted everything. Majority of our homes were affected. About 20% of our students lost their homes, everything in their homes, or water or electricity, the internet connections. Thus, we had to evacuate. Most of our students were in shelters. This, even though we are grateful to be they were grateful to be in a shelter, it also presented own challenges. There were challenges because there were noise background, there were internet connectivity issues. Some left their tablets at home, some tablets were destroyed. Nevertheless, we continue with our teaching. However, though, I must say only about 20% of our students were attending online classes. Mm-hmm. We had to reach them, we had to call them, we tried to find some of them. There were excuses, some were frustrated, which we understand. Some were disinterested. And then the few that came on, there were some that paid attention, some that mute their mics and were away from their tablets. And then there is the few that pay attention. The homework was another problem. We could not get them to do their homework. I don't know if it's because a lot of their materials were at home, or they were just frustrated, and I understand. It was very challenging for us. Mm-hmm. I was asked if their learning has improved. It's disheartening to say that I do not believe majority of my students' learning had been improved. For example, I have a batch of remedial students in Form 2. A class of about 25, and I can say I only saw like 20% of them during the week. I would WhatsApp them beforehand. Even the other teachers would WhatsApp them beforehand, individually and in the group chat, for them to appear online. And they still didn't help the situation. We would try to contact parents. We would receive excuses. It was frustrating. Even for me, I have homeroom students who are more advanced and in the upper forms, and they would say to me, "Miss, this is not working for me. They are disinterested in this platform." For CXC this year, we had to borrow a space in another secondary school, to reach our students to prepare them for the CSEC exam this year. That's how, with regards to their socio-emotional, I would say it depends on the environment where they evacuated to, and also their home environment before. Some, they are sociable, so some were able to manage. There were those who I think were affected more than others, especially since they lost their homes and they were dispatched from their families. Some of them were frustrated. There were cases where those were abused who went to private homes. It was a frustrating experience, having to deal with online and having to be in a shelter or someone else's home. Even for us teachers at the time, we were depressed not being in our own space, in our own environment. Yes.
Ms. Child, thank you very much for just being so candid and transparent about the challenges. You have not sugarcoated it, and I don't think we should. Clearly, you've done your best as a parent of a primary school child, as a teacher in secondary school. You know, the government has done what it can, but we need to do more. And as you spoke, one of the things that, you know, clearly came through to me is this need for us to protect our children. Because what we're seeing is that we can easily lose a generation in this pandemic if we're not careful. the outcomes are uneven. They are suboptimal. Some are learning, some not learning so much. You gave the example, maybe 20% of the students, what you saw, or who you saw. The others not interested, they're not engaged. Which takes me to the point that as adults, we have to do everything we can to get our children back in school, as in classroom, physically. And among the things that we have to do, I have to go back to that because that is clearly part of the solution, is that adults have to be vaccinated to protect children. Teachers have to be vaccinated to protect children and themselves. And of course, their loved ones. Because just imagine COVID is with us for another 2 years. I don't know when it will end, so I'm not making any forecast. But what will happen? Are we going to continue in this mode for the next 2 years? When this is all over, where will we be with education for our children? And what is going to be their future? And by implication, the future of our region. I want us to connect the dots. Our choice is not simply a personal choice. It is a personal choice with massive implications for everyone else. And today, our focus is our education and our children, our students. And clearly what we're hearing and what you know to be true from your personal experiences is that our children, many of them, are falling behind. What can we do? What can we do to arrest this situation? What can we do? One of the things we certainly can do is to step forward and be vaccinated to protect them and to get more people. Because what is happening, P.S. Hodge, you know this, the teachers here, you know this. Every time there's a case, a positive case, that classroom is exposed, the children have to go home and go online. And then we start this quarantine and contact tracing. And then, by the way, parents are also implicated and family members. Where does this vicious circle end? Where does it end? Our children are suffering. And I'm glad we're shining a light on that situation today. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? What action are we going to take to protect our children and, by the way, our future, the future, our economies? That's what we need to be thinking about. So I want to thank you very much for that. I'm going to pause the questions now because you've been sharing and I've been listening, and I think what you're sharing is meaningful for all of us. I hope it's also encouraging people who are also in this journey to see that they're not alone, and perhaps to also get some perspective and some encouragement as we continue this challenge, to address this challenge. But let me pause, panelists, with the questions now. I'm going to go to the poll right now. And then I want to see what we have in the Q&A, and then we'll come back if time permits. But we got to be dynamic here, and I love what you're sharing. So thank you very much. We want to really encourage everyone to step up and do their best. So today we have 3 questions, so let's go to the audience poll right now. If you're just joining us, you're listening to ECCB Digital Dialogues. Our focus today is pandemic and education. With me, our panelist, P.S. Vincent Hodge, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education in St. Kitts, Ms. Beverly LeBlanc, educator in Dominica, with special focus on children with special needs, and Ms. Onella Child from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a parent as well as a teacher, a secondary school teacher. Now to the poll. So we have 3 questions, and we'll now go to the poll. And by the way, if you're just joining us and you want to be part of the poll, it's www.menti.com. And then once you go there, the access number today is 55681307. Now to our first question. And I think Olivia Longhorn is assisting us today. Hello, Olivia. So let's go. Question number 1. So the first question we have, we just wait for the question to come up. How adequate was the education infrastructure to allow the region to quickly adapt to the new mode of instruction and learning occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic? Here's the question. How adequate was the education infrastructure to allow the region to quickly adapt to the new mode of instruction and learning occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic? There are 3 responses. A, we were very well prepared. B, we had the basics. C, the pandemic exposed serious infrastructure gaps and inequitable access to connectivity and digital tools. That's the first question. So we'll see the answer shortly. I'm going to go to the second question. Second question, do you believe remote or online instruction has been effective in helping students during the pandemic? Do you believe that online or remote instruction has been effective in helping students during this pandemic? And the responses are yes or no. And the third and final question is this. What do you think is the most pressing reform needed in the region's education system to make it fit for the 21st century? What do you think is the most pressing reform needed in our education system to make it fit for the 21st century? And we have four options. A, greater integration of technology. B, stronger focus on STEAM subjects, STEAM, science, technology, English, arts, and mathematics. I'm sure I missed something there. Science, engineering, arts, mathematics. C, a more individualized approach to cater for students' learning, their learning styles, because students learn differently. And D, enhanced training for our teachers. And D, enhanced training for our teachers. So those are the four questions in our poll today. We are going to put up the responses soon. In the meantime, while we put that up or we get that going, I think we can go to the Q&A. So while we are waiting to get the poll, and you can still check it out, you can go into Mentimeter right now and answer these questions. We're going to show you the results in a little while. I think we can now begin to go to a Q&A to get our audience involved. So let's see what questions do we have. Again, good morning, welcome. If you're just joining us, this is ECCB Digital Dialogues, and our discussion today is pandemic and education. So, yeah, I see people are listening. Okay, so before we go to the Q&A, I think we now have the poll. So Olivia, go ahead with the question 1. Let's put up the poll right now. And you can see that 93% of those who have voted so far said the pandemic has exposed significant infrastructure gaps and access to connectivity and digital tools. 93% of those who have cast their vote so far. So there's an overwhelming consensus that we have issues in terms of readiness. And I think P.S. Hodge affirmed that when he spoke earlier. Second question. Olivia, can we take the second question? Second question, let's see what we have so far. We have a neck and neck here, 50-50, literally. The question is, do you believe remote instruction has been effective in helping students learn online? 50% of you say yes, 50% of you say no. Well, that's right on the middle. All right, you can still go ahead and cast your vote. We're going to keep that open. Third question, please. Third question, please. So this question, for those of you, just to remind you, is what do you think is the most pressing reform needed in our education system to make it fit for the 21st century? 40% of you say greater integration of technology. 40% of you say a more sophisticated approach to understanding and addressing our students' learning styles. This is very important, learning styles. And then 24% of you say enhanced training for our teachers. Enhanced training for our teachers. By the way, nobody said that we need more STEAM subjects. Well, I have a strong concern about that because we do, But this is your poll, these are your answers. So I'm just reflecting what we see. 44%, yes, we need greater use of technology. 44% say that. 33% say we need to calibrate for our students' learning styles, a more individualized approach to learning. And it was very interesting when Ms. LeBlanc was speaking about individual learning plans for her children with special needs. That is consistent with what we're hearing. And then 20% of you say enhanced training for teachers. Thank you. The poll remains open. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you. Let's now go to the questions. We want to take a few questions. So question number 1 for UPS Hodge. On a scale of 1 to 10, how have the tools of monitoring and evaluation been utilized within the education sector here in St. Kitts and Nevis prior to the COVID-19 pandemic? Okay, well, I thought it was during, but this says prior. But PS, any comment on this? How have the tools of M&E, monitoring and evaluation, been utilized in education here in St. Kitts prior to the pandemic, and if you can as well during? PS, any views on that?
Yeah, thank you, Governor. Of course, we, here in St. Kitts, we are actually revamping our curriculum. We are writing a new curriculum spanning from preschool, early childhood, right up to post-secondary, tertiary. And M&E is one of the key features. Monitoring and evaluation is one of the key features that is built into this new curriculum. So at all levels, there are a set of criteria, a set of look-fors that teachers themselves are given,
yes,
that would guide their own monitoring and evaluation, as well as our principals and education officers who are charged with monitoring instruction in schools, especially principals, because they're underground and they have to do a lot more monitoring. So they have certain devices or certain instruments,
yes,
that are used to monitor instruction in classroom. The new curriculum is also providing a set of criteria by which our students would graduate from secondary school.
yes.
So we are no longer, when this is completely rolled out,
Yes.
we are no longer depending on our students passing a number of CXC subjects to recognize them as graduates of our secondary schools. We have a number of criteria that we have established with this new curriculum. And we are saying that once these students have met this criteria, they're qualified for graduation. And so this in itself provides some form of monitoring and evaluation. For example, service learning, students would be expected to complete, I think it's 120 volunteer hours of work in the community as one of their criteria for graduation. And students have to complete X number of courses in mathematics. They have to complete X number of courses in science, in technology, in TV, and so on. And all of these are built-in devices for monitoring and evaluation. We are also expecting that persons who are lead writers or evaluators of the curriculum would be able to continue the monitoring process based on continuous assessment. Teachers are encouraged to do continuous assessment, and so the lead writers, the curriculum leaders, those who are in the process, they would have to continue, or they would gather that data and see how students are doing in the various topics based on the continuous assessment that is inbuilt. So we're no longer saying that students have to wait until the end of a term or the end of a semester to be given a grand big test. As teachers complete a particular unit of work, a certain amount of lessons, then they assess students. And this has merit because they're able to know which topics, which areas, which children have not mastered particular topics, and they're able to reteach or redirect and differentiate the instruction. One of my fellow panelists, and I think you too, Governor, spoke about the giving children the opportunity to us as teachers focusing on their learning skills, their learning styles.
Yes.
And this is exactly speaking to differentiated instruction. As a matter of fact, when our schools started, that's one of the activities that teachers were doing in school, getting to know your students. And that is based exactly on their learning styles and how teachers can use this information, students' learning styles, in order to deliver effective instruction.
Right, right. Thank
Pause
you.
here,
Yes.
Governor.
Yeah, thank you, Pierce. And I recall when you resumed the term in September 2020, your instructions to teachers were continuous assessment, no end of year,
Yes,
end of term
correct.
exam, just focus on remedial and continuous assessment.
Correct.
Yes, and that made a lot of sense, a lot of merit. Good, thank you, Pierce. Let's continue.
Governor,
Yes, you want to come in? Sure.
Yes, I just wanted to say something in light of what Mr. Holt said. He was talking about assessment, and which is very, very critical. You assess for learning, you assess of learning, and you assess as learning, because that will give you an
Sorry,
idea
could you
of
repeat that again?
differentiate.
Could you just repeat those three?
You assess for learning because you need to know the students' learning styles, their learning preferences, and their interests.
Yes.
And you assess as learning because that is going to guide you in terms of the content and the process.
Yes.
And then you assess of learning, which will guide you in terms of what kind of product. So you assess also. Continuous assessment is very, very critical for ensuring that our students meet the learning outcomes. So you need to have, you don't wait to just have a summative assessment, you need to have a formative assessment. So you have 4, which is a diagnostic, there's no grade, but then you have as the students are learning, you give assessment, and assessment doesn't have to be a written test. There are so many different ways you can assess the students. And then you assess of learning at the end. Now, if you know the students' learning styles, then you can differentiate the product. So you give them, they meet the same outcome, you just give them a different product to produce that they have learned the content.
Right, thank you. I see P.S. Hodge nodding in agreement with you, and as one educator to
Absolutely.
another. Yes, yes, very, very good, very good. All right, so let's go to another question. Could we just roll the tape? Let's see what else we have. We're going to just pick a few. Yeah. 1 in 10 evaluation, we covered that one. Let's see what else do we have. I think there's a question here about what can we do in terms of remedial work. I know in St. Vincent and Grenadines, Ms. Charles, there is I think you call it ROLES, a special program the government and UNICEF are partnering, UNICEF is partnering with government to roll out. It's called ROLES, which I think has to do with remedial learning. Maybe you could say a word on that, Ms. Charles? That program in St. Vincent and Grenadines.
Good morning again. Yes, we have been trying with it because we are struggling in that arena with remedial. We have this program. We try to meet our students by doing it even online with blended learning and face-to-face. As educators right now, we are mindful of the different learning styles, and we are also trying to cater to them and at the same time, we also see their need as in to cater for them socially and emotionally. So we have had counselors, we have had persons speaking to them, going to the schools, encouraging them, while at the same time working with them to improve their work, improve on their performance.
Right, right. The styles are so important because, I reflect on my own children, and our first daughter likes reading and will read books Our second daughter seems to read better using video. So she will absorb material, but she's not using the books as much. She's more on the iPad, but she's learning. Of course, old school me would say, well, read the book, because that's what I grew up with. I didn't grow up with television. I grew up with books. But it's just understanding your children and the learning style. So as you spoke about that, it just brought back my own personal experience with our children and the fact that they learn differently, and we have to understand and cater for that. Right. Well, so I want to ask any one of you, what are any additional reflections you have before I come to the question of what next for education system? What else can we do with remedial to address the learning loss? Because we've lost learning. Our children, have fallen behind in some cases. P.S. Hodge, please.
Yes, Governor. I'm glad that we had 50% of the persons voting to say that online learning has been effective. Mm-hmm. It has prevented some learning loss, some measure of learning loss, because if there wasn't any instruction at all, the situation would have been even worse.
Yes.
So we have to do a certain amount of online learning, yes. We have to ensure that persons have devices to bridge that digital divide. We have to make sure that persons have the devices, persons have the connectivity.
Yes.
I guess governments would have to help to pick up the slack.
Yes.
In St. Kitts, we did some of that. As I said, we provided about 1,800 tablets. We did about 400 laptop computers for teachers. That might seem a drop in the bucket, yes, but I think to some extent it alleviated the situation in some places. Mm-hmm. We went to the extreme to pay internet service, I think for about 6 months, for a number of households where there was no internet connectivity.
Yes.
And that again might be a drop in the bucket, but it helped to alleviate some of that situation. Mm-hmm. All of our students are not going to be able to succeed online because we have the specially disadvantaged children, or those with learning disabilities, those with physical disabilities.
Yes.
And they cannot be able to function in the online world, the virtual world. And so we have to resort, if we want to be inclusive with everybody, we have to do some paper-based. We have to do some paper-based because we have our preschoolers and we have some kindergartners, grade 1 and 2.
Yes.
Again, may not have the motor skills and so on to manipulate. Some of them do actually, but the majority may not. And so we have to provide people-based other physical and concrete material that these students can learn with. So we can continue to do these things and try to reduce definitely the learning loss, because in years to come, that's when it's going to manifest itself, when we realize that students have so many gaps in things, in concepts and knowledge and skills that they should have developed during the pandemic.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, P.S. P.S., don't go too far. There's a question here for you. What has been done to assist private daycare centers during the pandemic? This is a question from Facebook.
Could you repeat, Governor?
Yeah. What has been done to assist private daycare centers during the pandemic? Many had to close and did not reopen, thus putting a heavier reliance and strain on the government system. What can be done to assist private centers and to reduce the already overcrowded environments in the government daycare centers? So this is a question about daycare centers, which has implications for the world of work, because you have to have childcare to be able to go back to work. By the way, this is not unique to us in the ECCU. This is the very conversation you hear in the United States with the infrastructure bill and this question of childcare. Mothers in particular, some fathers, but mainly mothers, cannot return to work, the labor market, unless they have somewhere safe with where they can have their child cared for, and that is an issue. But the question is, what can be done or has been done or is being done to help with the daycare centers, especially the private ones? Any perspective, P.S.?
Thank you, Governor. Essentially, whatever assistance or whatever provisions are provided, most of it provided to our government facilities in terms of early childhood. The government has 15 government-owned early childhood centers and St. Kitts. I can't recall the number on Nevis, but it's not a big number. And generally speaking, whatever assistance we give to our government centers, we try to duplicate that for our private centers. For example, the private centers have the opportunity to receive duty-free concessions on materials and other resources that they import from overseas to be used in their centers. Private daycare centers, nurseries, preschools, they have staff that are employed by STEP, which is a government agency. And of these same STEP workers work in our government centers. They work in private centers at no charge to the private proprietors. The government pays those wage bills for those workers, and so that would be an income in a way for the private centers. When we have resources to distribute it, just recently, I actually visited the Early Childhood Center, and they were packaging a number of resources, including face shields, face shields and other consumables and manipulatives to send to private centers, which is the bulk of centers actually in St. Kitts and Nevis, you know. And so at present, the Minister of Education is actually discussing the idea of giving a little bit of a stimulus to the private centers. I don't want to say much on that because the minister is working on that, but that is in the pipeline to give a little bit of financial stimulus to the private centers. In addition, there's a subvention. There's a subvention that government pays for every early childhood student. I think it's $25 per head, per child, every month. And so the private preschools, they benefit from this subvention. The proprietors might not see that as a benefit to them, but more as a benefit to the parents. But nonetheless, it's a benefit. The Ministry of Education, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, we appreciate the work and the contribution that the private centers make to the early childhood sector. Because definitely the government can't do it alone. And so we applaud the work that is done by the private proprietors for early childhood education.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure the questions for the private sector or private sector daycare centers is a question across the currency union. So thank you very much for that perspective. I think perhaps we could, I was just checking, perhaps we could go to the fifth question and just ask you, about the future. So as we look ahead, we've discussed the challenges, we've discussed our current realities, and the challenges are many. The reality is challenging. So now with a growth mindset, what opportunities can we pursue to address reforms in the education system? And you've touched on some of that already, but I'd like us to now ask each panelist to just talk a little bit about how do we, with all of our learnings coming out of this pandemic, what should we be doing as a region to get our education system fit for the 21st century? I could start with you, Ms. Child, and then I'll ask each of the other panelists to also weigh in on this. Just your view. What should we be doing? What should be our priority focus be?
I think we need to be more of a community. I think other countries need to help each other out. Our education system needs to be lifted, whereas more technology, information is shared, more devices are distributed. Our teachers are more trained for this time, for this era. Our parents are involved as to how the gadgets should be used and how they are supposed to work. how to use them, because our parents are allowing these children to just use their gadgets for different purposes. So I think we need to get everyone on board, the parents, the teachers, the stakeholders. Our broadband companies need to be more helpful towards us. They need to assist us. They need to make these services more reasonable, at a reasonable cost.
Right.
That's what I think.
Right. Thanks for that. I'll come back on that to talk a little bit about what ECCB is doing, because I'm sure you're asking, so what is ECCB doing? So I'll spend a minute on that shortly. But let me go to Ms. LeBlanc. I see you smiling. What say you?
Thank you so much. I was going to ask a question to what you jumped in. The thing about it, there's no one size fits all for each. Every country has their own challenges and they have their own experiences and they have the resources. I'm listening to Mr. Hodge talk about the stimulus to the private schools, and I know my teacher is listening and she was like, oh, Miss Liba is going to ask me to write a letter to the PS or to the minister to see if we can get a stimulus because we are a private school. I just had to pardon all the school fees of last year because the parents couldn't afford to pay it. So I know she's listening. She was like, okay, here she goes. She's going to ask me to write a letter for stimulus. But I'm happy that you're doing that in St. Kitts. Now, there's no one size fits all. And I'm just going to kind of expand on what Ms. Charles said. I think what needs to happen, and there needs to have a lot of interagency collaboration. The pandemic affects everybody. And then the thing about it, no one Ministry of Education, no one department can do it all. So we need to have a multi-sectoral approach. We need to have the welfare, because we talk about child abuse. So we need to have the welfare on board. So it doesn't have to be just because it's education, let the Ministry of Education deal with that. No, social protection. So we need to have a multi-sectoral approach. We also need to understand the needs of our learners, and we need to change the way we do teaching. Too many times we come to the class and we think the students are blank slates, and we use the banking approach to education. We need to use the inquiry approach to education. I don't just come and dump things onto you like you deposit in the bank and when you need the money, you're going to withdraw. No, we need to change the way we do education. We need to change our perspective of teaching and learning. We also, so that when we do that, then we can differentiate content, we can differentiate process, and we can differentiate product. So we need to, and I said interagency collaboration. I do a lot, and we need to network. With me, when I'm like, you have the money, I got the time, let's see how we can merge our money and our time. So I'll give you the time, I'll implement the project, you give me the money. So, and I mean, the thing about it, during the pandemic, we had no school, and people thought, okay, because Achievement Learning Center doesn't have a physical building we did more work during the pandemic than ever before. We were able to partner with UNICEF, and we were able to deliver 250 packages, relief packages, to families of children with disabilities. We were able to train teachers, but we partner with Nathan Banksy Foundation from Jamaica. We partner with our friends in Barbados. We partner with our friends in Guyana. So we train our teachers. And we are now partnering with the Ministry of Disabilities in trying to develop a database. So it's a matter of we partnering and what do you have to offer? Two of us, what do you have to offer? So we need to hold each other's hands and not just be in your little corner, bright in your corner. No, it's all of us. It's a global pandemic that is affecting everybody. So we are not going to be looking for heroes of COVID. There are not going to be any heroes. We are just going to be having to work together to improve our education system. We also need to share best practices. I mean, what's working good in St. Kitts? Let's see if we can adapt it for Dominica. What's working in St. Vincent? Let's see. It's an opportunity for us to have the real island regional integration that we've been talking about for so long. Now is the time that we need to put our action together. Let's get some boots on the ground. And there's also need for continuous professional development. I know that the Ministry of Education is responsible for training their teachers. However, it's again a global pandemic. There are so many opportunities for you to upgrade yourself in terms of the technology. And I was talking to my teachers last week and they laughed when I said, we have the University of YouTube. You can go on YouTube and look for different ways. What fun activities can I do with my students? We have online learning. It's not going to go away very soon. Let's see how we can have icebreaker. You don't have to sit in front of for 2 hours and teach. We have fun breakers. We can have show and tell. We can have all sorts of stuff, fun activities. So you need to change and make the learning fun. Make the students want to come to the online platform. And so basically, that is basically what I would like to say in terms of where do we go from there. We need to now go back to the drawing board, see what's happening. Let's come together, let's share, take a little piece from each other and adapt it to suit us, make it culturally relevant from us. But we need to learn. We need to stop seeing that thing like, yes, it is an enemy, but let's make it our friend by benefiting from what it's giving us.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Miss LeBlanc. The passion is clear. What did you say? You have the money and I have the time, so let's talk.
Yeah, you have the money, it's ECCB. I got the time, I got the resources, so we can talk. Let's be. I mean, you're there with us. The other persons on the panel who may have the money and may want to help us to expand special education. Because you heard Miss Charles talk about the remedial learners. These are students with learning disabilities. These are students with intellectual challenges. And because they already have the intellectual challenges, they don't think, if I cannot perform, they already develop learn helplessness, because if I cannot function in a face-to-face, I'm not going to function in an online platform. That's their mentality. We have to change that.
Yes. Yeah,
we have to change that mentality, say you can do it. And then that is why our motto is changing your potential into possibilities. You have the potential. Let's see how we can do that. But it will take collaboration. It will take networking. It will take shared best practices and continuous professional development.
Right. I think we could all agree with that. And I think the key message coming out of your intervention is that it's really partnerships. And that's important because sometimes, it's the government. And the government has to do what it has to do. But the government can never do it alone. And I speak as a former financial secretary. So we do need everybody to play their role. As St. Kitts like to say, all of society approach, Pierre Sarge? All of society approach to dealing with this. You wanted to comment, please. Pierre?
Yes, I think that my colleagues, Ms. Childs and Ms. LeBlanc, have actually articulated a very good vision as to how we can move forward. I just would want to piggyback on one or two things. Professional development, continuous professional development. And that is one of the components of the new curriculum that we are rewriting here in St. Kitts and Nevis, professional development, because our teachers would benefit from the experience of retraining how to do things differently. And so we're not going to be able to take everybody and put them back in the teachers training college to retrain them. So we have to do this on-the-job training, job-embedded training. And so for me, the retraining of teachers is one of the big steps moving forward into the 21st century. Teachers have to be able to meet students where they are, they put attention to their learning style and change their own way of teaching. You might have the opportunity to live and teach in the United States for about 16 years. And I never got up in front of any of my classes and did a big lecture for 10, 15 minutes. I was the facilitator in the classroom. I facilitated the learning. Yes, it involved a lot of preparation and hands-on materials and so on to get in place beforehand. But once students come to my room, it was their lesson and I just facilitated the process. And so we in the Caribbean got to change the way of our delivery, that didactic method of teaching, and get our students become more independent learners. We have to produce more independent learners in the 21st century, right? Yes, definitely computer is going to have its place. We're going to need those to do online stuff, but that face-to-face and teacher style, paying attention to students' learning style is of great importance.
Right. Thank you, PS. And I suppose, we really have to be creative in this period because our children, especially the younger ones, cannot sit at a computer for 5-6 hours. Adults struggle with doing that. In our digital world, we are trying to say, don't have a meeting go beyond, 2 hours. Try and keep it tight. That doesn't always happen, but after a while, you have these issues with back pain and this pain and that pain and the other and so on. And so we really have to be creative as we deliver in this online mode. And as you said, be facilitators. That's a very interesting concept. Before we take the final round, where I'm going to ask the panelists to just give their closing remarks, I think, Ms. Child, you want to comment? Yes,
yes.
I want you to
I would like to add to Mr. Hodge. Yes, as teachers, we need to be retrained, especially with this technological era, right? I believe that we are supposed to cradle our children at this moment, cradle our babies into this new era. The times are changing, and we have to adjust to the change. We don't have to see this change as a weakness, as a threat as teachers, as we do. We need to approach it as a way of strengthening our educational system, our education system, Prensky 2001 says our children are digital natives. So I think as parents and as teachers, we all need to get on board. Our parents, our teachers also, we as teachers are lagging behind, whereas our students are more technologically inclined than us. We as teachers are afraid of the internet, are afraid of the technological world, but our students are more on par. So as educators, educators and stakeholders, we need to bridge this gap. We need to get on board with our students as well. I'm guilty of this. We know that our students are ready, minus the fact that they don't have devices and internet connection, but they are more bold and open for this new environment. However, I also believe that blended approach is important still because we need to have face-to-face interactions, especially for our students who are struggling emotionally, socially, intellectually. It is sad, as Mrs. LeBlanc said, especially those who are being abused secretly. We as teachers are some of these students' parents. We know more about their children, sad to say, than they do. They would approach us, and it is disheartening that the pandemic is preventing us from being in the classroom because we don't know what they're facing at home. And parents, it is an all-in-one, as Ms. LeBlanc said. Our parents need to be more involved. They need to meet us halfway. As we are struggling here, we are struggling in the classroom, we are struggling online. The online is a good platform because it is giving us new ways to teach, new and interesting methods. We are making it more fun. But at the same time, we have our disadvantages. I think our parents need to get involved. I think they need to be more educated on how to use the technology, how to monitor their children, especially at night when they are sleeping and the children are on these devices. I believe also that apps can be created. I mean, I was on an island previously, and there's an app called Class Dojo, where I would track my daughter's progress at school, her conduct for the week, if her dress code was inappropriate, if she has a test next week. All that information is being shared on the app. Our school doesn't have that app, and I believe it's time for us to upgrade. We need to improve with technology, have this information for us and to share with our parents, make this app simple that they can understand, just like they're on the phone, they're on TikTok and stuff. I believe they would actually come on board as parents if we involve them. I believe another avenue that we should start looking at is that our country, especially my country, our learning resource centers, our community centers, needs to be upgraded. Some of the computers are not functional. We need to upgrade our computers. We need to improve the internet access. We need to make accommodations, especially now for during the day, so that if there is, for instance, some students who do not have internet access at home and those who have lost their tablets, they can go to the learning resource centers during the day and have their online classes. Even our churches need to become on board. Have a space in the church for students to come during the day so that they can go online and do their classes. Lend them tablets, upgrade. Help us all. Everyone, no man is an island. And I believe if we start like that and if countries start looking out for each other as well, we will get through this. Nothing is impossible without God. And this is just another, this is happening. The pandemic is real, but we can bypass this as a nation, as a Caribbean region, if we work hand in hand to appreciate this new time. Maybe it's a time for us to be closer with our family, but we need to be able to, even our schools, they need to be properly sanitized. The stations need to be upgraded. And we need to place plastic containers on this to prevent. But at this moment, I support blended learning. We want face-to-face and we want online because we are getting enough resources from the online as well. And we need to see our students face to face. Yes, I believe that all in all, once we work together, once we help each other out, and we need to help our parents, we need to help our students. We can't blame anybody for what is happening at this moment, but I believe if we work towards a solution, things will get better eventually.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Child. I heard the passion there and the love for your students, and you said a lot there. And I will also take that as your closing as well. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Welcome.
I want to just encourage you. I want to encourage you on the journey. I know it's tough at the moment. Ms. LeBlanc and then PS. Closing remarks, please.
Okay, closing remarks. Coalition Partner 2 for the 20th Century Learning has identified 4 skills for today. Number 1, creativity. This is about thinking through information in new ways, making new connections, and coming with innovative solutions to problems. So we need to have more creativity. Critical thinking is about analyzing information and critiquing claims. Communication, understanding things well enough to share them clearly with other groups. And collaboration, about teamwork and the collective genius of a group that is more than the sum of its parts. So these are the 4 C's that I think we need for our 21st century. Secondly, our teachers need to deep down inside. Teachers, we are more creative than we think we are. And when your back is against the wall, you come up with all sorts of stuff. As I said earlier, we were funded by UNICEF to do a project to address the COVID pandemic. How are we going to share that information to our students with special needs? So we did animation series. Our first animation series is called Let's Talk Germs. What we did, we used the students' favorite cartoon character, and we wrote a script, and we had them saying it in a way that it is very culturally relevant and very Caribbean relevant. Our second one is coming up. It's called Let's Talk Sanitization. So we have Let's Talk Germs, Let's Talk Sanitization, Let's Talk Social Distancing, Let's Talk Face Covering, and Let's Talk Vaccination. This is basically issues that are surrounding us right now, but we put it in a way which is very friendly, learner-friendly, that the students can learn. It is free, so we'll share it with you so you can have it, your kindergarten. You're talking about it, you sit and talk to the kindergarten about germs, they will just look at you and laugh. But as far as they're concerned, they're sitting and learning about germs, and they will remember what Miss Dej said about talking about germs. So they will remember Miss Dej. So every time you come to talk to a child about germs, they remember what Miss Dej said. So you get them to learn the stuff. So I believe we're in an opportunity to learn from each other, to share from each other, to share, to learn, let's take a hold of the opportunity, as you said, Miss Charles. And Miss Child, don't let COVID beat us. We have to beat that thing.
Indeed.
Yes, we have to beat that thing. But I'm also calling on the Ministry of Education to support the teachers. Because it's not everything we hear we have to dump on our teachers. There are so many platforms that we can use. Let's just take one and make that one our own. And when you have mastered that one, you take another one. Because what's going to happen, we have to budget the information that we are getting out there, because this is going to cause us to be overwhelmed. So at our school, we know we are using Google Classroom, and we are trying our best to master the Google Classroom. And then, so if that's what we have and that's what working, let's work with it. So you have to know what works for you, because other than that, the teachers are going to get overwhelmed. We have to be creative, as I said, creative in teaching our students.
I'm going to have to intervene.
I know.
That's part 2. You're just starting up part 2. But
oh, sorry.
But thank you very much.
But then basically, that's what I wanted to just say.
You made a point. Seize the opportunities and let's move forward. And I think
yes, let's move forward with it.
You're demonstrating that by what you are actually doing. And you call
Thank you so much.
So I really appreciate your interventions today. P.S. Hodge, you have 1 minute.
Governor, thank you so much for this opportunity to participate in this digital dialogue. It has been very stimulating for me. I know some of my teachers and principals and other officials in the Ministry of Education viewing and listening. I'm hoping that it will be aid in the future so that more persons can be exposed to this. Now, I love the classroom. I love the classroom. When I exited the post of principal at Sandy Point High School, I went back to the classroom. And I came to the job of PS from the classroom. And so my heart and soul is in education, it's in classroom, molding lives, shaping lives. And I'm so glad for the internet, because the internet is allowing me to do my work all of this week. I have several meetings lined up, and they are because of the internet I'm able to participate.
Right.
Because I didn't know, Governor, I said to you on Saturday that I received a COVID result test saying that I am positive. But I have not been sick one day. And it's because of God first, and secondly, the vaccine.
Right.
That vaccine, which so many of us are refusing to take, will save lives. Because as I'm sitting here, I'm participating from home, I'm quarantined, and it's because of the vaccine I still feel as strong and as healthy to do my work. So the COVID will come, it will affect us, but we have to be productive still. Right? And this is a message that we want to pass on to our teachers in particular. We are making an appeal to teachers to get vaccinated.
Please.
The hot news in St. Kitts today is that the PS of education got the COVID. That's the hot news.
Yes. But the
This
PS
is
education is vaccinated
person.
fully and able to function fully.
I am fully vaccinated and able to function. So this is the message that we have to continue. I am out front championing the cause for teachers and students to be vaccinated so we could continue to teach and learn.
That's right. And again,
thank you so much for this opportunity.
No, and thank you very, very much. And I like the fact when you called me, you told me, yes, that's the news, but we found a way to persevere, and I am grateful to you for that. And of course, if you didn't tell me and you told me that on the weekend, I would not have known, because nothing in your delivery today suggested that you have a positive result. So we thank God for that, because you're so needed at this moment. Yes. Thank you. So all I have to do is to thank the panelists. We enjoyed hearing from you, all three of you. My admiration for educators, for teachers, just grows by leaps and bounds. And I want to thank all teachers across our currency union for what you are doing in this very difficult season. And if you're feeling a little discouraged, I hope you are encouraged today. We are challenged, no doubt, but we can rise together and with God's help overcome. And I hope you are encouraged by the fact that, we have within us, with God's help, to surmount this challenge. I want us to then embrace more creativity. Ms. LeBlanc said, we have more creativity in us than we realize. I agree. Let us pull out that creativity in this period. So we heard from Ms. Child, we heard from Ms. LeBlanc, we heard from P.S. Hodge, and I think their perspectives are very useful today. As I conclude, let me say that ECCB is doing its part. Certainly, advocacy is one of the things we do. So a forum like this, we shine a light on the issues. You've heard me many times calling for a shift from subjects to skills. We've gone beyond that now. We're working with our countries and the World Bank on a Caribbean Digital Transformation Program. One of the things that we're doing under that program is to really work on building out digital skills among our youth. That includes, obviously, training for teachers. It includes our youth, and it really creating the STEAM environment where they can really flourish. Because by the year 2025, 25% of the global economy is going to be digital. And that's going to just keep increasing and increasing. We are almost at the end of 2021. The future is global, is digital. The future is digital, and digital is now. That future is now. So we have to embrace that. Secondly, we have been doing an interns program called Bright Sparks, where we go to our state colleges in the ECCU, we take some of our best young people in IT, and we bring them to the central bank to give them an IT experience. We started that program about, I believe, 4 years ago. We've had interns from several countries. We're looking to bring more interns, bright sparks as we call them. And in every single case, don't tell anyone I said that, we've kept them. We've hired them full-time on our staff. So it's been a great opportunity. And I see Shafari, who is one of the early bright sparks. Shafari was the first bright spark, actually, from St. Kitts and Nevis. We've had from St. Lucia, Grenada, and different countries, and we're looking to bring more. And Shafari is a very valuable member of our team now, full-time, and he's playing a very important role. Olivia Langhorn, Olivia is from St. Lucia, bright spark, full-time member of our staff. And I can go on with other names. Janelle Brathwaite from Grenada. Christina just left to go back to school. So that's a program we've invested in, and we really believe it's helping our young people, and of course the bank is benefiting. Every year as well, we sponsor 2 scholarships for SPICE, Science Program for Innovation and Science and Innovation, Caribbean Science Foundation. And since we've done that for, I think, 4 years now, every year we sponsor 2 students from the ECCU, our member countries. And then that prepares them now to go into a university, Ivy League, and so on, and pursue a STEM career or a STEAM career. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. We've also, where we can, we've donated some computers. We don't have a lot, but where we can, we've shared computers to help in the classroom and so on. So we continue to do our part. We want to do more. We have to do more. And I just want you to be assured that the ECCB stands with you during this period. As I conclude, then, I want to thank our panelists again, Mr. Vincent Hodge, William Vincent Hodge, PS, Ministry of Education, St. Kitts, Ms. Beverly LeBlanc, Dominica, Life Achievement Center, among other things. She wears many hats. And Ms. Onella Child, parent and also a secondary school teacher. And I want to thank you again, all of you. It was really a pleasure to hear from you today. Finally, to our team, Dr. Emma Fosuado, who is the coordinator of our dialogues in the governor's office, Mrs. Monique Franks, senior policy analyst in the governor's office. I want to also thank Ms. Elizabeth Whalen, who was on our YouTube and Facebook channels monitoring. Mr. Shafari Challenger, I mentioned him earlier, from IT. Mr. Alston Crawford from our corporate relations on the technical side. We also want to recognize Ms. Olivia Longhorn, who assisted us with the Mentimeter today, also in our IT department. And then I want to recognize we got some good support today from Elon Bradshaw, helping us with the live streaming, and his colleague, whose name I don't know at the moment. I want to thank them very much for their support. I love to see young people. I got excited. I love to see young people express themselves. I love it. It thrills my heart, in the bank and across the currency union. When I see them operating small businesses, when I see them on the technical side, I am thrilled. So I'm glad that you were able to help us out today, and I want to thank you. And on behalf of all the radio stations, the partners, broadcast partners, thank you very much, all of you. To all of you who listen, thank you. And remember what I always say. As a region, we cannot change our history. We cannot change our geography. But collectively, we can elevate our development trajectory through collective action and digital technology. Let us embrace that as we move forward. Thank you. God bless you all.